Okay, fourth grade, to get ready for our coil pots, first we need to start rolling out some coils. So this is about the size that we want. It's about the size of your pointer finger. Nothing, you don't want anything too small. It'll be too fragile, and you don't want anything too thick either. So I'm gonna show you how to roll out one of these, and we start with just a little ball of clay like that. Roll it into a nice ball. You can roll it on the table or in your palms. And then when you get into a nice little ball, you're gonna start rolling it forward and backwards with your palm, like so. And if you hear some thumping, it might be getting not completely round. And that kind of happens. Hold it up straight, tap it down, and then roll it again. Also, another trick is to grab the ends and twist them like this, left and right, and then that kind of helps it to stay nice and flat. And what you're doing is you're pushing the clay outward. So as you're rolling, the coils is going to get longer and thinner, almost like a worm or a snake. And remember, we're going for that thickness of your finger. So keep rolling like that, twisting the edges, and starting in the middle, work your way out. If you get thicker spots and thinner spots, don't roll on the thin spots, but focus more on the thicker spots for a little while until your coil comes out to about right there. If you want to, get your fingers, add a little bit of water to it. Before you move on, I would create a couple coils first and kind of set them off to the side like me before you start building your coil pot. So I'm gonna make another coil right now, roll it into a ball, and then I'm gonna start making another one, rolling it back and forth, pushing down. You gotta use your muscles and kind of push down a little bit. And again, if you hear that thumping noise, stop, lift it up straight, tap it down a little bit, and then start rolling, and then twist, roll again. As it gets longer, you can use two hands and start in the middle and work your way out. But until then, what I like to do is use my fingers and just kind of spread them out as I go. And then twist, start in the middle, go out, middle, and going out. And again, I'm rolling back and forth, starting in the middle, working my way to the edges until it's about the thickness of your finger, pointer finger. And you got a nice long coil. And then remember, when you're done, do add some water to it. That way it doesn't dry out on you. And you're ready to start. Now, to create the base, the bottom of our coil pot, we will be using one coil. I'm gonna use this one here because it is kind of a longer coil. What we're going to be doing first is rolling this into a spiral. So you're going to take the end, curve it down, and again, before you do that, do add a little bit more water to it so it doesn't crack. And notice how I am working on the table now, but when we start building up, we will be moving on to the cloth, so that way it doesn't get stuck to the table. But for now, I'm working on the actual table, and I'm going to make a nice little coil, making sure there's no gaps, and just kind of make it spiral around until we get a nice size base. At the very end, you can pick this up now and bring it over to the cloth. And I want you to, using your fingers or your clay tool, you're gonna smooth out the top, pushing the clay into the creases until we got a nice smooth base. And smoothing out the outside. Get your fingers into the water, really smooth it out. There you go. And you can do the same thing for the bottom. Smooth out. You're pushing the clay into the creases of the coil to flatten it out, and that makes sure that that clay stays together. A little more water to smooth it out. And again, make sure at this point you are working on your cloth, otherwise it will be stuck on the table. Smooth it out. All right. Now, doesn't matter which side you want to be the top of the bottom, that's fine. So this is our base, and now we're going to start working up. When you're doing a coil pot, you want to make sure you're slipping and scoring, adding clay. So there's a couple different ways we can do that. We can use the needle tool, and you want to score, which is making little lines all the way around the base. And don't go too deep, but you want to make nice little lines going all the way around. And you want to do the same thing to the top of the coil. And the scoring is going to be laid right on top of each other. And then, using this toothbrush, inside this bowl is some wet clay, very wet clay, which is called slip. So this is kind of like the glue. So you want to kind of brush that into the base and brush it onto the coil. All right. And then you're going to be laying that right on top of the base and wrapping all the way around and pushing down gently as you go around. And then where it overlaps, use your needle tool and cut down directly. I can turn it so you can see it, where that coil meets. So the extra comes off, and then you want those two to meet. And it'd be a good idea to add some slipping and scoring there as well, and smooth it out. To level it out. That's your first base. And then using your green tool, you want to smooth out the inside, pushing down the clay into the crease all the way around. And then using your finger, smooth it out. And it's the same process over and over again. You get your coil, slip and score, place it on top, smooth it out. But you also want to smooth out the outside too. Well, you don't have to, I guess. If you kind of like that coil look, you don't have to do the outside as long as you do the inside. But if you want the outside to be smooth, you can do that. So I think I'll leave it just so you can see what I'm talking about. This extra clay from that coil can be put into another piece of clay for another coil, but I've already got one ready to go. So I encourage you to make 2 or 3 at a time. That way the process goes a little quicker. So first thing you want to do is score the top. Go all the way around making little lines. Don't go too deep. Just barely scratch the surface of the coil. And then scratching the top of the coil. Again, don't go too deep. You shouldn't be cutting halfway through the coil. You don't want that. And then grabbing that toothbrush, getting some of that wet slip on top. And then on top of the coil. Like that. And then making sure those two are lining up. Pushing down gently as you go around. Until you end up back where you started. And just like before, take your needle tool where it lines up, cut down, and then smooth it out together. And also, I forgot to mention, don't start a coil where you ended last time. You want to make sure you're overlapping. Kind of think about bricks. They don't line up perfectly. So make sure those coils don't start at the same spot. Always start somewhere different. After you got that, just like before, in the inside or both, you're smoothing it out, pushing that clay and making sure as you're smoothing it out on the inside, you're holding it on the outside. That way we keep our nice shape. And you can always turn it around with the cloth as it rotates around, pushing it down as you go. The tool's great for pushing that clay down, and then use your finger to smooth it out. So you go all the way around, making sure you're always bracing it on the outside so it stays that nice round shape that you want. Again, get your fingers wet and really smooth it out. Don't add too much water though, because the clay will kind of turn into a mud, and you don't want that. That's too much water if you add too much water. If it happens, just grab a paper towel and just kind of wipe it up a little bit. Get rid of some of that water and that moisture, because otherwise it's just gonna fall apart. We want to have some structure, some durability, so you don't want to have too much water. Okay, so that's one coil. And so making sure you're also smoothing out, even if you want the coil, sometimes you'll still see some of those scoring, and so you want to smooth out around the edges as well. But try not to pick it up too much. All right, so I'm gonna set it off here, and then I'm going to move it to the side because I want to make some more coils. And so I'm going to go ahead and use the extra clay that I have and make a couple more coils and keep adding to mine until I get to the thickness or the height that I want. And I can also go outward as well. And the way you do that is instead of putting it right on top, you slip and score on the outside edge and put it on the outside, and that will make it go wider and up at the same time. So I'll do a couple of those to show you as well. All right, fourth grade. I'm gonna pause right there for my demonstration. As you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 layers up, and I started on the last two going outwards. So not only is it going straight up like a cup, but it's more going outward like a bowl. And the way I did that, if you saw in the video, is instead of scoring right on top, I actually scored on the edges, kind of the outer edge, and I put the coil on the outer edge and I went around. That causes it to go out and still up like that. You can add a few more coils if time allows. I'll pretty much let you keep giving you clay and adding coils as time allows, and then whenever our last 5 minutes in class, I'll pause. I will carefully flip it over and write your name and class code on the bottom using a needle tool.